March 10, 1945. New York Harbor was cold that morning. A gray mist hung over the water as a large troopship slowly pulled into the dock. The engines groaned, metal scraping softly against the pier. On board, 48 German women stood silently behind the railings, waiting. Most of them had not seen proper sunlight in days. Their clothes smelled of sweat, sea salt, and fear. Under their scarves and caps, something far worse was hidden. Lice. Thick colonies that had lived in their hair for months, even years. They had been told what would happen when they arrived in America. They expected shouting. They expected humiliation. Some even expected violence. After all, this was the enemy's land. A land they had been told was cruel, revengeful, and dangerous. But as the ship's gate slowly lowered, something strange happened. There were no guns pointed at them. No angry crowds. No screaming soldiers. Instead, there was silence and order. American soldiers stood waiting calmly. A voice called out, 2 by 2. Step forward. The tone was firm, but not harsh. The women hesitated. This was not what they had imagined. As they stepped onto the dock, something even more unusual reached them. The smell of coffee. Real coffee. Warm, strong, alive in the cold morning air. For a moment, several women stopped walking. It made no sense. They were prisoners of war. And yet the world around them did not feel like punishment. It felt controlled, clean, organized. They were led into a large processing shed. Inside, steam rose from metal pipes. Tables were lined with medical supplies, towels, and strange machines. Then came the announcement. Delousing. Hair removal. Shaving. A soft panic spread through the group. For German women, hair was identity, pride, femininity. Everything propaganda had taught them to value. Losing it felt like losing themselves. One woman stepped back, holding her braid tightly. No, she whispered. Not this. But there was no choice. The war had already taken too much. Now it would take this too. And as the first buzzing clippers turned on, none of them knew that this moment of humiliation would become something entirely unexpected. Not the beginning of suffering, but the beginning of a truth they had never been allowed to see. The first woman sat down slowly. Her hands were shaking. An American nurse stood beside her, adjusting a white cloth around her shoulders. The clippers hummed louder. And then they touched her hair. A long braid fell to the floor, followed by another. Then another. Silence filled the room. No one laughed. No one mocked them. Only the sound of machines and falling hair. For many of the women, it felt like punishment. Like shame being stripped away strand by strand. But something unexpected followed. A nurse spoke softly. It's okay. We have to clean you. You're very sick. The words were translated. The women froze. No insults. No anger. Only explanation. Outside, the cold wind of New York still moved across the harbor, but inside that shed, something unfamiliar was forming. Routine. Order. Fair. After the shaving came the showers. Hot water rushed down from pipes above. At first, none of them moved. They had not felt hot water in months. Maybe years. Then one woman stepped forward. Then another. Soon the room filled with steam, with sound, with quiet gasps. Soap was placed into their hands. Clean towels were stacked nearby. For the first time in a long time, they were not treated like burdens. They were treated like patients. Not enemies. After the showers, clean clothing was issued. Oversized, but warm. Then came food. The dining hall smelled like something they had almost forgotten existed. Fresh bread, meat, coffee, warm potatoes. One woman sat down and stared at her plate without moving. Her hands refused to lift the fork. This cannot be real, she whispered. But it was. Anna, a young nurse from Hamburg, finally took a bite. Her eyes closed instantly. Not because it was perfect, but because it was enough. Enough to remind her that hunger had become normal, and she had not realized it. That night, sleep came differently. Not on cold ground. Not in fear of air raids. But in beds. With blankets. With silence. Yet peace did not remove guilt. It deepened it. Because as they recovered their strength, memories of home returned. Of Germany. Of families surviving on scraps. Of cities burning under bombings. And now here they were, eating more in one day than their families might see in a week. The contradiction was unbearable. Days passed. Then weeks. The camp became a rhythm. Roll calls in the morning. Work assignments. Laundry. Kitchen duty. Medical checks. It was still imprisonment. But it was structured. Predictable. Almost humane. And slowly, something began to change inside the women. The enemy was no longer a simple idea. The American guards were young. Tired. Sometimes even kind. One guard, a boy from Iowa, tried to teach Anna English words during laundry duty. Soap. Water. Sun. He smiled when she repeated them. There was no hatred in his voice. Only patience. It confused her more than cruelty ever could. Because cruelty made sense. Kindness did not. Then came the day everything shifted. A film projector was brought into the camp hall. The women were told to sit. The room darkened. At first, the screen showed nothing but static. Then images appeared. Barbed wire. Camps. Bodies. Shoes piled in mountains. Hair collected in heaps. The women froze. Some stood up immediately. "This is propaganda," one shouted. But the images did not stop. And neither did the truth. The names appeared. Buchenwald. Dachau. Bergen-Belsen. Silence replaced protest. Anna could not breathe properly. The shaved heads on the screen looked like hers had looked just weeks ago. But everything else was unthinkable. Not punishment. Not delousing. Medical care. Rules. Here, she returned to chaos. Cold winters without coal. Long queues for bread. Buildings without roofs. And yet something inside her had changed forever. She could no longer see the world in simple terms. Enemy and friend no longer meant what they used to. Years later, when asked about her time in captivity, she did not speak first of suffering. She spoke of clippers, of hot water, of soap, of the moment she realized that the people she had been taught to fear had chosen discipline over revenge. They had followed rules even when no one forced them to. That, she said, was the hardest truth to accept, because it meant everything she had believed about the enemy had been incomplete. Not entirely wrong, but not entirely true either. History, she learned, destruction. And in that moment, something broke inside many of them. Not belief in Germany, but belief that they had understood the world at all. The war ended quietly for them. There were no celebrations inside the camp. Only announcements. Germany had surrendered. The Reich was gone. And the women who had once believed in its strength now sat in silence, trying to understand what remained. Weeks later, transport lists were prepared. They were going home. But home no longer meant what it once did. When they arrived in Germany, there was nothing waiting for them except ruins. Entire cities flattened. Families missing. Streets unrecognizable. Hamburg, Cologne, Berlin, all scarred beyond recognition. Anna walked through her neighborhood and did not recognize a single building. Even her childhood home was gone. A crater of broken stone stood where it once was. The contrast haunted her. In America, she had lived in order. Clean water. Hot food. Met is never made of pure heroes or pure villains. It is made of choices. And sometimes, the most powerful choice is simply to remain human when everything demands otherwise. The war had taken millions of lives. But in small places like that camp in Virginia, it had also revealed something else. That even in the darkest systems, humanity could still survive. And sometimes, it could even cross the wire. If you enjoyed this hidden World War II story, please like, subscribe, and join us for more forgotten stories from history.